It's time to find out
What Shane said
with Shane Manilla.
What is good, everybody? This is going to be a brief episode, I promise you. This episode is going to focus on a couple things, but really just one thing. But what it's going to focus on is how do we find arbitrage wide receivers? Arbitrage, as the way I understand it, is instead of this guy, that guy. The market might prefer this player. Can you get a cheaper version of that player? Well, for cheaper. One of the things, or the tool that I really wanted to use and highlight today, is the Trinity Tracker on DD Fantasy. And if you only knew how many times I had to stop the recording to spit out the correct name, you would feel very, very bad for me. DD Fantasy. We're going to go ahead and use the Trinity Tracker tool. And there's actually a couple different ways we can use it, and we're going to do that. What you can do is if you want to look at players on the same team, wide receivers on the same team, you want to see which one of them is doing more wide receiver things, participation, air yards, touchdowns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the special secret sauce that goes into it. If that's what you want to do, you want to look at the players on the same team, wide receivers going against each other forever, say like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That's not where I'm going, but I'll get back to that. You can go ahead and use the seasonal Trinity score versus points per game. The default is going to be the seasonal Trinity score versus points per game. At least I think it is. And if you want to do, that's what I use, or that's what you should use when you're looking at teammate versus teammate. But we will get back to that. That's going to be the second part of this. The first part, the very first part of this, is how do we find players that aren't on the same team that might be arbitrage players? Again, how can I find a cheaper version of a player that's producing at the same level or better? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the Trinity score report. Bring that up nice and smooth. I'm going to go ahead and set this entries to 100 so I can see the top 100. So you see that I have that up. Part of this, and what I like to do again, is just I'll jump on KTC and look at the rankings. And that's how I got where I got. I looked at the rankings and I looked at wide receivers, compared their rankings on KTC and compared what their Trinity scores are on the Trinity Tracker, Trinity score report, to see maybe who's a little overvalued. What I came up with was Garrett Wilson. I looked at Garrett Wilson and just wanted to see where he was at on this, because he is ranked 10th on KTC. Garrett Wilson is all the way down at 32. His score is, he's the 32nd highest Trinity score. Decent, right? I don't want to put it out there like that's terrible, but for the wide receiver 10, that's probably not great. So I looked at the wide receiver 11, and as of today, right now, wide receiver 11 is DK Metcalf. So I went and looked up DK Metcalf on here. And if you look up DK Metcalf, you'll go ahead and, if you want to count with me, we can do that. But DK Metcalf is actually 16th in the league right now. You scroll down, there's DK Metcalf, right? My dude's sitting with a nice Trinity score of 7.274. Let's just call it 7.3. 7.2.3. He ranks 16th. He's right in that wide receiver 1 range. Garrett Wilson, my dude's got a 6.73, ranking 62nd. That's a little lower, obviously. So what you want to do, again, looking at the Trinity Tracker, you can see, again, I'll bring up Metcalf specifically. No, that's John Mechie. That's not who we're, oh, there he is, DK Metcalf. 7.27, excuse me. I actually undersold him. 7.27, whereas Garrett Wilson, my dude, is way down at 6.7. 6.7 is not bad. It is in a range that we generally like. But it's significantly under what DK Metcalf's is, lower than, I should say. So what do we do with that information? Oh, right? That's really all that matters. Well, what you should do, or what you should be thinking about doing, is it possible for me to get more DK Metcalf on my team, maybe at the expense of Garrett Wilson? Now, I just want to jump in here on myself and cut myself off. Remember, the Trinity Tracker, or the Trinity score, this is just a tool. Don't forget to use your own brain, right? So if Juwan Jennings is on here and Juwan Jennings is putting up monster weeks, I wouldn't tell you to go ahead, and Juwan Jennings is pretty high, but I wouldn't tell you to trade Garrett Wilson for Juwan Jennings. That would be absolutely bananas, right? Because the supporting evidence isn't there that Juwan Jennings is going to be an elite wide receiver based off his career. But if you look at what DK Metcalf has done, right, in comparison to Garrett Wilson, Garrett Wilson's been in the league 3 years. This is his third year, actually. In those 3 years, he's finished as the wide receiver 41, 32, and this year he is the wide receiver 30 right now. DK Metcalf, outside of his rookie season, when he was the wide receiver, we're going to scroll down, excuse me. DK Metcalf was the wide receiver 42 in his rookie year. He's never been lower than wide receiver 24 in any other season of his career. And he was a wide receiver 10 the wide receiver 10 in 2020. So historically, he's been better than Garrett Wilson. And he has one season where he was the high end elite wide receiver. And that's where his Trinity score is this year, for what that's worth. This year, again, I noted Garrett Wilson sitting at the wide receiver 30, where DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 7 overall. Again, it's only 4 games, but you're using all available evidence. DK Metcalf is absolutely smashing him this year. And throughout their careers, DK Metcalf has been a better wide receiver historically. There's also this. Real football comes into play. And I am not a scheme expert, not a guru in any way whatsoever. But there is the talk that Ryan Grubb, the Seattle OC, is using DK Metcalf differently than how he was used in the past. He was used in the past a lot. Just go deep, bro. Just go deep. Toss it up there. That's what all we need you to do. He's running a more complete wide receiver route tree now. And evidenced by that is that his ADOT, 12.1, which is still pretty good, really good. 12.1, his ADOT this year, lowest of his career. So he's definitely getting used differently. He's getting targets. And if you watch the games, he's definitely being used differently. So again, what's the practical value with this? Well, what you should do, at least what I would be doing if I had any Garrett Wilsons left on my roster, can I do the old switcheroo? Can I move Garrett Wilson for DK Metcalf? Now, straight up, we don't like doing straight up because what's the edge there? Yes, you might get the better player, but that's not enough. That's not enough juice, really. What you want to try to do is a deal like this. DK Metcalf, you want to trade, Garrett Wilson and a third and try to get back DK Metcalf in a second. Now, you got to do this quickly, like this week, because even though Garrett Wilson isn't a falling knife exactly, he's just about to be a falling knife. My dude has fallen from the wide receiver 6 at the beginning of the season to wide receiver 10 in the span of 4 weeks. 4 weeks. So again, not exactly a falling knife, but he's falling. So that's what I'd be doing. I'd be looking to see, can I move my Garrett Wilsons for DK Metcalf? And in general, can I just get DK Metcalf on my roster? I'm not going to go through every trade. You can go on Dynasty Daddy and look up some types of trades. I don't even think that first take is controversial. Not a big deal. This is probably where it's going to get a little controversial. So, and this is for the people that like to look at things. Okay. So if you want to look at things, let's go to this seasonal Trinity score versus points per game. There's a reason I'm going to be using this portion of the tool, because I'm going to look at 2 players on the same team. And again, I looked at their KTC rankings, and then I looked at their production, and I looked at their Trinity scores to see if maybe there's a player that is undervalued in comparison to, well, their teammate. And in this case, what I came up with was, and this is going to hurt because I really do like him a lot, but Chris Olave versus Rashid Shaheed. If I knew how to spell Shaheed, maybe this would come up easier. There you go. Rashid Shaheed. Looking at the 2024 season. I'm going to look at the whole season again. I'm going to update that chart. Come over here. This little dot. Who's that little dot? That little dot sitting at 6.58 which is right between it's like a low end wide receiver one. It's not like it is a low end wide receiver one. 6.58, Rashid Shaheed. My dude, Chris Olave, on the other hand, sitting at 7.34 Trinity score. So there's definitely a gap there, right? One is a low end wide receiver one based on the Trinity score. That's what they should be. The other is damn near a high end wide receiver one. But just because you're supposed to be something doesn't always mean that you are something. Unfortunately, I talked about Chris Olave in the follow the volume that I share, but that follow the volume is just for the patrons on DD Fantasy. So join our patron. I still do follow the volume every week where I break down volume, snap shares, targets, routes, runs, things like that. Anywho, Chris Olave has not really been elite. He's got very, very few games in his career where he's broke 20 points per game. So again, their Trinity scores, there's a gap, obviously. Like I said, Chris Olave is in the high end wide receiver one range, and Shaheed is in the low end wide receiver one range. Still very good. So, but does that difference in Trinity score, does that justify the delta that is on KTC in their rankings? Chris Olave comes in as the wide receiver 12. Shaheed, wide receiver 44. The points per game difference, that also doesn't justify it. Rashid Shaheed, he is scoring 13.23 points per game. Chris Olave, 13.3. It's exactly even. Now, I am not saying Rashid Shaheed is a better wide receiver than Chris Olave. I do not believe that under any circumstances. I love me some Chris Olave. What I'm saying, though, is the gap in the community's thoughts on those two players doesn't match reality. And using the Trinity score, you can see they're not that far apart, right? They're both basically should be wide receiver ones in that range. But Rashid Shaheed is closer to producing at that range as opposed to Chris Olave. So again, what do you do with this information? Let's look at it from a practical perspective, because that's all we care about, right? Otherwise, we're just talking. So what do you do with this information? Well, first thing that popped in my head is, how do I get Rashid Shaheed on my roster for cheap? Or how do I turn Chris Olave into Rashid Shaheed and a first? Is that something that I can make happen? So what I did is I went ahead and jumped on Dynasty Daddy. Dynasty Daddy has a trade database. If you did not know, Dynasty Daddy is part of DD, and it is awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the screen on Dynasty Daddy. And again, we're going to bring up the trade database. If you're not sure where it is, come over here on your left. Yes, I just went like this to make sure that that's my left, and it is. You're going to go scroll down here to get to the trade database, which is over here. Hit trade database. This beautiful little John comes up. You see all these players. You can see Rashid Rice, not surprisingly, is the number one traded player in the last week. Not surprisingly, but that's not what we're talking about. We're going to leave that Rashid Rice talk for somewhere else. But what I wanted to see is, are there trades involving both of these players, Chris Olave and Shaheed? Are there trades that involve both these players? Is it just a pipe dream that I think that you can get a first and Rashid Shaheed for Chris Olave? Nope. Here you go. Rashid Shaheed, Aaron Rodgers, a 2025 first for Tony Pollard, Chris Olave, and a 2025 third. Over here, again, Chris Olave and this is a couple weeks, 14 days ago, so a couple weeks ago, but I'm imagining the market hasn't moved much on this one. Chris Olave for Mike Evans, Rashid Shaheed, and a 2026 first. That tells me that trade that I wish cast, that I dreamt into the existence, can be made. You can make that trade. Rashid Shaheed, you can trade Chris Olave for Rashid Shaheed and a first. And I guarantee you, I can almost guarantee you we would see more of those trades on this database if people thought it could happen. I bet you a lot of people think that they cannot make that deal, so they don't even try it. All right, that's it. Like I said, man, just wanted to keep this quick. Using the Trinity score, the seasonal Trinity score versus points per game, and then using the Trinity score report on DD Fantasy. So don't yell at me. DK Metcalf, I want him over Garrett Wilson. Rashid Shaheed, I don't want him straight up over Chris Olave. I don't want anyone taking that away, that being the takeaway from this. I'm just saying, if I can move Chris Olave for Rashid Shaheed and a pick, I think we're talking. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. Everyone have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.